Today is Friday, March 21st, 2025, and you have found the Living Youth Podcast. My name is John Robinson. I'm here again with my podcast co-host partner. We don't use partner, do we, Mr. Smith?
I think we can use partner because it's been messed up by the world doesn't mean we have to accept that.
True. How you doing?
Doing fine. Thank you for asking. It's been a good week, a busy week. I feel like my to-do list have just been randomized all week long, and yet as we slide into home base, that is the Sabbath. I use sports analogies every once in a while, Mr. Robinson. I don't use them well. It feels good. It feels like it's been a productive week, and very much looking forward to the rest God has for us on the other side of sundown.
We struggled with the title of this podcast. What are we talking about this morning?
It is still morning. That's right, as we record this. And we, talking about it, we realized the word date and dating, those words have been mixed up in the culture. I've heard that from parents. I've heard that from young individuals in terms of how the word is used. And so we're going to go to basics today. Today, we're going to answer the question, what is a date anyway?
Excellent. I would like to hear that answered. I'm dying to hear what you say.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm dying to hear what you think of what I say. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us here on the Living Youth Podcast. And part of what motivated us to talk about this, I know, at least I can say, I have long appreciated the church's take on dating. It is very much not the world's take, and I grew up in the world's take. Well, I can't exactly say that. I grew up, because I grew up a little longer ago, but for 18 years of my life, before I attended God's church, I was very much steeped in the way of the world. The way of the world has only gotten worse. So I can't say I grew up in this modern world's take on dating, but I still did grow up on a messed up take on dating, where really you didn't date. You kind of looked for someone to, we didn't even say go steady anymore. We got lazier than that, Mr. Robbins. We called it going with. Mm-hmm. Who are you going with? And that just meant essentially who's your steady, exclusive, boyfriend or girlfriend.
Right. I forgot about that term.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We're going together was another one.
That was it. We're going together. That's right. I remember even sitting in the back of the car as riding with two adults, my mom and just a friend, and my mom trying to press me to explain this term. But you go back in ye olden days, it was going steady, who's your steady. Well, that's kind of what I grew up with. And then now I remember giving a sermon on dating. I had one of the few times in the field when I had like a 7-part series sermon, which it might have been being 5 parts, because I get easily distracted. So I do one, but then the next Sabbath, I really want to talk about something else. So it must have taken me years to finally hit all 5 parts. But among them, one was on dating. I kind of want to talk about marriage from kind of the beginning of possibilities all the way to the end. So I did talk about dating principles. And after my first sermon, a couple of parents came up to me and highlighted, hey, thank you for the sermon. They were very nice, but you kind of need to know the word dating has really changed. Mm. And they understood, hearing from various 20-somethings and stuff they knew, and also worldly access, that often when people say, oh, we're dating now, one, it means definitely very exclusive. Like you don't even use the word date otherwise. Oh, we're dating now. That means we're essentially boyfriend, girlfriend, and frankly, sleeping together is usually kind of the implication there. And knowing that, it really caused me to have to, I want to rethink and be careful how I'm using the term.
Right. Well, I had a similar situation where I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this. The idea, the phrase "hooking up," when I well into my adult head, hey, we'll hook up later, man. We'll meet up with our friends.
Yeah, exactly. We'll play basketball or do whatever.
Then I had to have younger people explain to me that meaning had changed.
Yeah, you won't be doing that. Yeah, just a terrible degradation of our culture and its words. And so we kind of want to get back to the basics of dating in terms of what dating actually, when the church talks about dating, what do we mean? In the world, we've already covered some of those things. It can mean, regrettably, fornicating, and also other things. The idea of going on a date, and this is where part of why we want to talk about these things is because even if you're thinking, well, I want to do things like the world, I want to do things like God would want me to do it. But the world's ideas have their ways of sneaking into our brains, even when we don't recognize it. In fact, we're coming on what holy days, Mr. Robinson? We're coming up on the spring holy days, which includes, which one? The days of unleavened bread. And that's one of the big lessons is that leaven spreads, right? That's what it does. It just infects my wife actually is doing a lot of sourdough baking. And you start with that, she does that classic sourdough starter, which she'll have to kill come the days of unleavened bread. But you start with that, you have that starter, you put that plug in, and sure enough, it spreads into all the unleavened areas.
Yeah, no, it's such a great metaphor because it's if you just leave something out in the window, it will eventually get enough wild yeast on it that it'll start to rise. I mean, like it's like the perfect for how pervasive it is, and it will eventually affect you in time.
It really does. And so if you're not, the passive stance is that the world's ideas tend to bleed into our brain, and dating does that. So we tend to think of dates purely as romantic. Almost by definition, as if it's not romantic, it's not a date, or going on every single date with this kind of is this the one mentality, like, oh, is this the one, where there's so much pressure on this particular date. And also dating, and I definitely saw this when it comes to as a high school teacher and dealing with teenagers and others. Dating tend to be very self-oriented. Like you're going out on this date because of what you hope to get out of it. And I'm not necessarily just talking about in terms of physically inappropriate things, but it's all about you, having a good time. You pick this person because you want something, versus thinking of a date, as we're going to talk about it, as an opportunity to actually show somebody else a good time, and completely turning that attitude around.
See, that was a lesson I learned, but way after I was done dating.
Well, yeah, you know what? And that's actually for those out there listening who are married. Hopefully the dating hasn't ended, I should say. I know my wife and I did really good in the past when the boys were younger, and then went through a drought where we didn't, and then we've begun doing that in the last many years as well. Having a date night, making sure there's some time where she and I go out and get coffee or go out and get something to eat. And it's almost like you're scheduling something because you are scheduling something because it's something worth it.
Yeah. Well, I'll freely own this because it's the kind of thing that hopefully will be helpful to our listeners. And that is, like, when I was out, quote unquote, dating, trying to find the girl that would be Mrs. Robinson, I was looking for the person that would complete my life. I mean, my entire orientation was not solely selfish. I mean, like I had some awareness that she might have some needs.
At least some awareness.
Right,
that's good.
Right. But nothing like I had when I much later. And so I hopefully we can, if you're at least kind of going to dating somewhat aware that they also have needs and they also hoping to fill, a role, if I can say that, just as you are, and it really does need to be a combination thing, but it's so easy to go into it only thinking about what you're going to gain.
Right, and not thinking of, how can I serve? Is this a person that I'm even adequately equipped to be able to serve?
I did have in my mind that I wanted to take care of her, but that was so nebulously defined.
Right, we don't spend as much time thinking about that. Well, so we're going to start here at the beginning with defining a date. And I'm going to highlight, and I'll do my best to put this on the livingyouth.org website, this article by Mr. Jonathan McNair from Tomorrow's World magazine titled, "Should We Kiss Dating Hello?" Clearly a play on the old book, I Kiss Dating Goodbye, by Josh Groban. Not Josh Groban. I can't remember the fellow's name. It's Josh something. But that fellow who ended up actually abandoning his faith and his beliefs and just completely went the opposite direction after writing a book. But Mr. McNair's article, Jonathan McNair's article, "Should We Kiss Dating Hello?" is very good. If you haven't read it again, we'll have a link to it on the website. Boy, I wish I'd written down what month and year it is. You just get the printed magazine. But it really is very good, and it kind of reverses some of that sort of, dating is all bad, we shouldn't date idea, which I should say the original book, I Kiss Dating Goodbye, there was something about it where it did recognize our current culture was broken. That was a positive. It's just that it went too far in terms of what it tried to recommend as the fruit tended to show itself. So I'll just read this section from Mr. McNair's article. The subhead in this particular part is, "So just what is a date?" And he defines it very simply. He says, let's start with definitions. Though the world has corrupted the word, a date in this context is simply a scheduled social occasion in which individuals of the opposite sex meet to enjoy each other's company. It could include just one guy and one girl, or it could be a double date with two couples. It could even be a group date with several people. A date could be a conversation over coffee, a walk in a park, or something more adventurous like an afternoon at the local rock climbing gym. It can be as personal as a candlelit dinner for two, or as impersonal as a beach outing for a dozen. So I like that because it also kind of highlights for as parents, we want to ease our children into, and the whole article talks about this, helping your children grow into good dating habits. And it kind of highlights that, yeah, from the very beginning, once you're kind of thinking, hey, I want to let them go out with, let these girls go out with these boys or something, they're beginning the dating process. That is dating, where, again, you have this kind of scheduled time, this planned time where you're going to get together with members of the opposite sex and go out for some kind of activity. So I think it's a nice working definition.
Okay. So if you guys don't mind, like, one of your sons was always very good about asking girls if they wanted to get some coffee. Very low stakes, friendly. Hey, how you doing? It's tough to have that kind of conversation at like church, let's say, with lots of people around. Is that dating?
Yeah, that would be a date, okay. Right? Asking someone out for coffee. Actually, you go back to Ambassador College, which I did not attend, but I know they would ask someone if they could escort them to services. Date. Yeah, the Sabbath date, sit next to each other at services or something. So there was
I thought that was good, but that was a lot easier when you had, if a class was, say, 250 people, and you were all basically the same age. That was and everybody expected it.
Yeah, that's another thing that's really nice. Too. When there's this idea that this is what our culture does, then it really also lowers the bar. Right. And when I say lowers the bar, I mean where the bar can be too high. Like as we'll talk about, is this idea that every date is this person like me or not? Well, no, it's not. It's an opportunity to get to know somebody. If you remove the romantic burden, honestly, we do the same thing with dancing at camp. That's one of the things I really like about it. The idea of asking someone to the dance, it's easy to be infected by the world's ideas like that's the most romantic thing ever. Oh, the guy came and asked me to dance. Versus camp, we try to help you see, dancing is actually a lot of fun. And you ask a lot of girls to dance if you're a guy. And if you're a girl, you get asked by a lot of guys. And it's a nice time in a very structured environment to just enjoy each other's company in a particular kind of mode. And if you remove the romantic burden, then it's like, if I tell that guy I'll dance with him, he's going to think I like him, and I don't want to do that. But if the culture is such that you remove that, then that burden isn't there. Yep. Same thing with the guy.
Yep.
So that's important. All right. So before we move on to make some points, we want to defer to Disclaimer Guy, because as brilliant as Mr. Robinson and I often are, at least I can speak for Mr. Robinson, just often filled with brilliance, we do want to point you to your parents. If you're younger and listening to this, then your parents are given to you as guides and such. So not to mention your local pastor as well. And also culturals. There are cultural differences we have to keep in mind. We're here speaking as a couple of Americans in a world that is turning against America over time. But anyway, we're speaking here. We need to defer to those things. And so Disclaimer Guy, help us out here if you would.
When facing large decisions, be sure to seek your parents' help, guidance, and advice. Not just the advice of faceless voices on a podcast.
Thank you so much, Disclaimer Guy. Okay, we have a few observations that we're going to talk about for the rest of the podcast. Sometimes about the effects of thinking of dating like the world does versus actually a healthier way to think about it. The first one that we'd actually noted was that the world tends to load, and we talked about this already a little bit, so much expectation of romance on a date that the end result is often terrible in all sorts of ways. It often, in some cases, it leads to no dating because guys don't want to ask a girl to date, to go out on a date because they don't want. Well, I don't want her to think that I like her, right? I'm not trying to do that. I just thought it'd be really great to get to know her and go out for coffee. For girls answering could be the same thing, a lot of burden. And then actually, if you do take one out and it's got all this burden of romance on it, or that other people project onto it. I've had guys tell me that it makes it hard because if they want to they want to take another girl out, like maybe they took one girl out for coffee, but then a ladies event is coming up and they want to take another girl to a ladies event, But then all the others think, oh, that's terrible. He took her to coffee, but now he's taking somebody else, to the ladies' event. When really he's just trying to serve a lot of people. That the worldly idea, this kind of Hallmark movie idea that, every date is loaded with the burden of romance and the rest, just makes it difficult, makes it hard.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm very helpful today. Go on.
Okay, then let's move on. And I should highlight, please do read Mr. McNair's article because it goes into a lot of more detail about some of these things. And that is that the next thing I want to talk about is that group dating is not a bad thing. It is actually a very good thing. And this is something that actually some younger people, which keep in tune with your parents, make sure you're always talking to your parents about things. But it's something that actually kind of grows pretty naturally. You start to build a certain, number of friends or people you've met at camp, now you're at the feast. And if parents think it's okay, which I always, again, defer to them, but group dates are a nice opportunity because you can practice a little bit there. You can, let me just say, when you're a young guy, it kind of helps to learn that some kind of things you might kind of do, or I'm not talking about inappropriate things in terms of bad things, but ways in which you might communicate and joke around the other guys.
Right.
Aren't all that great to do. The girls aren't always impressed,
Yes,
by the
no.
same kind of things guys are
That's
impressed
good.
by.
Good. That's very, very true.
And so group dates kind of take some of that pressure off because you're getting the chance to see everybody else in that. There's not this one-on-one pressure, and you're getting to enjoy the company of the opposite sex, and in a way that's you're not being pressed to have to figure out on your own, how do you really behave and such. So nice safe environment.
Yeah. No, I didn't really do a lot of dating, that's a whole other story.
Mm-hmm.
But when we did, when there was groups, I always vastly preferred that because it
really?
took some of the pressure off, and you could kind of be yourself a little more. And
Yeah, right. Again, growing up in the world that dating really wasn't even dating. It was trying to figure out the one person you're going to exclusively spend time with, which was honestly really is kind of ruinous. In fact, I would even say, oh, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. Well, you're narrowing things down when you're 13 or 14 or something to this one special person. It's amazing how much heartache it potentially introduces, frustration, not to mention temptation. But then you have scenarios where, let's say you kind of do on the sly. It's just kind of you and this gal or you and this guy, and everybody knows it, but it's kind of, and then sometime later, if it doesn't work out as you mature and you grow and that was a bunch of wasted time when you could have been going out with a whole bunch of other people. Another one of the benefits of group dating is you get to learn how other kind of personalities you never would have thought are actually interesting to you. You discover that they are.
Totally agree. Maybe this is a good moment to, even though this is not the main point, to plug Mr. Weston's unshakable, unbreakable dating rules,
right.
Because like you were saying, not be careful to not get yourself in a situation where the dating gets too personal. And there's some ground rules on that will keep you safe and keep you out of trouble, especially, I have to say it and decide if everybody else thinks I'm just part of the patriarchy, but especially protecting the girls in dating.
Yeah. No, it's really very important. I mean, even the Bible talks about it being the weaker vessel. Doesn't mean weaker mentally and all those kind of things. But Mr. Aguin always thought had a good analogy that they think of women as a fine wine glass and guys as a bucket. Well, you don't protect the bucket with the wine glass. You put the bucket over the wine glass to protect the wine glass, and the bucket, takes the damages. And it's not just from the world, but it's also kind of keeping something very safe and structured.
And reputation.
Yeah, I bet I can find, reputation. Oh, very, there's an old song, even old for us, so it's old. And I can't think of it. I can't think of the title, but it's that song where a guy's trying to explain to his date. They went to the movies.
They fell asleep.
And they fell asleep at the movies, and now it's something like 3:00 in the morning, and they wake up and everybody's gone, and they're like, "Oh man, our reputation is shot," And so it's it's important to protect that reputation. That anyway, all those things. Mr. Weston, I think I can find the old article that Mr. Weston wrote as was some time ago on his Unshakable Unbreakables, and we were talking about it just recently because I don't know if he's doing a talk here at LE. That's one of the benefits of sending your kids to LE Charlotte is they get talks like that from the presiding evangelist. It might be that talk or a different one, But he was talking about how the Tomorrow's World article didn't have, I think it's 7 points. And the Tomorrow's World, for the size, they had to shrink it down to 5 points. Because I was joking with him. I said, oh, you got like 19, 20, 23 points, right? But he does have these unshakable unbreakables, and they're not unreasonable. In fact, I wish I had had them when I was growing up. It would have saved me from so much difficulty that I end up having to deal with. So maybe we'll include those as well, because you do want to keep those things in mind. But group dates really are an opportunity to learn. Let me fess up. I've mentioned this before, that I didn't really know anyone like my now wife. I didn't know anyone like her in high school. And in terms of personality and preferences and such, all the girls I quote unquote went steady with, using the old terminology, none of them were like her. If I'd ended up with any of those girls, I would not have ended up with a girl like my wife.
Wake up, little Susie.
Ah, you found it. Good job. Wake up, little Susie. There you go.
It says, we fell asleep. Our goose is cooked. Our reputation is shot.
That's right. Oh, the song doesn't even tell you how it ends. All you know is he's just really, they're scared and frustrated.
But I think it tells you how it ended.
Yeah, well, it ends with a bad reputation. That's right. Even though they're innocent, at the same time, they didn't consider their reputation well enough and allowed themselves to fall asleep at the movies. So with group dating, you have that opportunity, and I that's what I appreciate about when I started attending the church. There wasn't all this pressure to find one so fast, right? You're actually allowed to just be your age and grow up a little bit. And because we would go out in groups, I started being exposed to different kind of personalities, and come to find out the personality that my wife had, one that I'd never been exposed to before, was fantastic. That was really that was intriguing for me. And if it weren't for that getting rid of that mindset of just finding one and sticking with them, but giving yourself the opportunity to explore a lot of different people and personalities, I never would have found that.
Well, may I mention one thing? What do you mean by a lot? Like I don't like. I think it puts a stress on some. The stress of, I have to date a lot of people.
Okay, that's a good question. Yeah, what does it mean a lot? At least 90. It has to be at least at least. No, I'm just kidding. No, let me.
I hope your church area has 90 people.
No, a lot is let's say a lot is a bad choice of words. More. I think that, and I say this from experience in terms of seeing it in high school, that it's too easy for the very young to just be enamored with one person and then suddenly think, oh, that's the perfect person.
Right.
And so, this idea of being open to more. And that's, again, what's nice about group dating, because you have the chance to start younger. If your parents are good with that, you have a chance to start younger before you're ever really ready to narrow down to just one person.
So,
you have this chance to be exposed more.
In this circumstance, perhaps a lot is more than one.
Yeah. Let's go with that. It's at least more than one. That's right. A greater than or equal to sign in front of the one. So group dating gives you that opportunity.
Yep. Nope. I like the group dating a lot.
All right. So, okay, moving on. Even later than that, say you can potentially move out of the group dating stage. When your parents decide that a double date or a one-on-one date might be appropriate, which eventually that does come, you still want to avoid thinking exclusively. When you're young, when you're still young, when you're a teenager, you're still putting your life together. You're still putting the foundations of not just what it takes to have a life with another person, but you're still working on yourself. There's still things that you're actually learning about yourself at those early. On one hand, that'll kind of never stop. I mean, I learn things about myself even now. It doesn't happen as frequently, but especially in these days leading up to Passover, like it does, you do learn things about yourself. But at the same time, when I was younger, I was learning a lot more. And I got to admit, even some of the things I was learning were wrong. I was actually coming to wrong conclusions about myself that I can see myself more rightly now. So even as you do move to that kind of a double date scenario, say, where it's a smaller group or even a one-on-one dating, it's still important to not jump into thinking exclusively so quickly. And to being open to the idea that, okay, I've served this person with a date, I can serve somebody else.
Right.
I remember reading an article by someone who's actually pushing back on the I Kiss Dating Goodbye idea by Josh Not Groban. And they highlighted their grandmother's advice. I thought the grandmother's advice was pretty good. The grandmother was saying when she was younger, and she goes, oh yeah, when I was a teenager, went on dates. suddenly it's kind of grandma voice a little bit. It's a little gravelly, kind of masculine, but still. Oh yeah, when I was younger, I went on dates all the time. You know, it's Billy would ask me out, and then Charlie would ask me out, and Danny would ask me out. But she said that they had a rule. Her family, her mom and dad, his great grandma, great grandpa. Their rule was you couldn't date the same person twice in a row. And now that because it's a large town, etc. But you could date the same person more than once, but you always had to have some other dates. So if Billy asked you out for ice cream once, then Billy couldn't take you out again until Charlie did. And that's part of what they were trying to protect them from. They were trying to, and I'm not saying that's the way all parents have to handle it, but I thought that example in the article was really good, that grandma's parents were simply mindful of trying to keep their young, growing, and somewhat naive to life, because we all were young, daughter from getting exclusive too quickly, before it's time. And also it enabled her to serve more people as well, to serve more of the guys in terms of by being a good date for them and giving them the opportunity to give her a good date. And I think Ambassador College used to have a rule, something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was something about trying to keep the students from getting too exclusive.
Well, they didn't
too quick.
want this. So the term in Ambassador College was paired off.
And
they didn't. It depended when the year I went, which was in the early 90s, 92, 93 maybe. They did not want you to get paired off as freshmen.
Right.
And then after that,
then you're a little more mature. You can start to look.
Well, some only went because it had a 2 and a 4 year program, so some would only go 2 years. So you'd kind of have to let the sophomores possibly get paired off. But
right.
Yeah, and that you know what? There was a girl I liked, and she was trying to follow the rules, and it was frustrating to me at the time. But in retrospect, that was good because you got a lot going on your freshman year, trying to take everything in, and your life is changing, and and so getting, you're talking about a little bit about this idea of giving people a good date.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I would have never thought about as a youth. As I've already been on record of, I'm kind of out there dating, looking for what I want.
Right.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, you do want to have a good impression. You do want to put your best foot forward. You want to seem like a guy that's worthy of finding the right girl. But at the same time, I don't know. It's just there's something different about the mindset when you're going, I just want this person to have a great time.
Right. I want the end of our date. At the end of our date, I want this gal or I want this guy to really be glad that we went out.
Yes.
It doesn't have to mean to think that I'm the cat's meow. I like that old phrase, cat's meow, which is kind of funny because I'm not real pro cats, but that our bee's knees. Oh, there's another good one. It's not that I want this person to be so impressed with me, but I want them to have had a great time. I want them to really be glad that they went out, which, by the way, does have the practical effect of others wanting to go out with you as well. If there's talk that people enjoyed this date or they enjoyed that date, there's a nice benefit there. So let's go ahead and talk about that in terms of giving someone a good date. That is, trying to make the date something where the other person has a great time, where they've really enjoyed themselves. There's some scriptures that we like to bring to bear, like Philippians chapter 2. These are spiritual principles that apply to dating. Am I saying, sure, there's no Bible scriptures that apply to dating? Of course there are. God gives us a guide that impacts virtually every part of our lives. I don't care if it's a matter of what hairstyle you want to wear. God actually has principles that address that. And in Philippians chapter 2, starting in verse 3, the Apostle Paul says, "Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also the interests of others." When we keep in mind that our whole purpose for being alive, the only reason we're even taking in breath, is to become like Christ and to take his characteristics and his values and instill them within ourselves, well, then, of course, dating is going to be an opportunity to reflect that. It's an opportunity to think, okay, like Christ, I want to focus on the other person. I don't want to be about what I can do for myself. What does what does this person really enjoy doing? If they don't like movies, why would I take this person
Right.
out to the movie? If the one thing I did learn about this girl is, she hates coffee. Well, I'm not going to take her to Starbucks, right? Unless I know there's something there that she might. Some people would say Starbucks isn't real coffee anyway. It's really just milkshake disguised as coffee.
Well, I've seen people defend Starbucks because they sell so much coffee, it's difficult to actually source enough coffee to sell the coffee. And so naturally, the standards are going to be kind of all over the place. And for all things considered, Starbucks puts a decent cup of coffee forward. And I'm okay with that.
Look at. And Mr. Robinson knows his coffee. In fact, I remember your office. You don't have it in here, do you?
I do.
Oh, there it is.
And
Yeah,
then it's not hanging on the
coffee
wall.
poster. That's right. But what is it behind? Your coffee apparatus
Yes.
here in your office. So very nice. Anyway, so it's a matter of thinking of the other person, being other people focused. Mr. Herbert Armstrong, you say it all the time. There's the way of give and there's the way of get. I can definitely say from a worldly perspective that dating tends to be about the way of get, which honestly, anytime I read modern commentary or even a newspaper article in the New York Times about marriage, even marriage now is pictured essentially as a means of getting. You married this person to help fulfill yourself. And that's kind of an extension of the world's ideas of dating as well, versus Jesus Christ says, no, it should actually be focused on the other person and
Right.
trying to help them.
Well, let me try to add a little bit to what you're trying to say here. And like, if we're honest, and if you're a normal person, most people, if they go out on a date, are at least a little bit nervous.
Oh, sure.
Because let's be honest, if a boy and a girl go out to a date at the appropriate age and under the appropriate circumstances, both are going to be a little nervous, some more than others. And this is coming from, of course, our older age and understanding a little bit better on how to help other people relax. But that's one thing you could do if you go in thinking, hey, I'm a little nervous on the date. They're going to be a little nervous on this date. But what I want to do is help them, put them at ease. I want them to help them feel comfortable. And one of the benefits of doing that is, I have a story I tell from time to time, which is when I was relatively new to giving sermons. I had done a lot of sermonettes, but the sermons were a little bit newer. And I was giving a sermon outside my normal church area. And we were passing through and visiting, but we knew a lot of people there. And I'm standing in the back waiting to be announced to go up for the sermon, and I was feeling a little bit anxious and nervous about it, which really surprised me because I had given this sermon a couple times before and had gotten real positive feedback on it. And I don't remember how conscious this was, but I remember thinking, okay, you spent your time. This is getting into something else a little bit. I spent the time researching this information. I was careful to put it together. Like, I didn't shortchange anything. People have told me they appreciated it and valued it. And then I realized I was thinking about myself too much. Was a little too, and I'm thinking about going up there and, putting on a good impression. And I changed my mindset to, no, I'm going to go up there. I have some information I've put together that I know helps people. This will help and benefit somebody out there in the audience somewhere. And as soon as I did that, kind of the nerves went away, and I did just fine on it. People are nervous on a date for a lot of reasons. Some people get nervous, start talking a lot, or there's, introverts. My wife was very introverted. And if there's one thing I did right when we were dating was just help to keep the conversation going and didn't try to put her on the spot. And anyway, there's so many ways you can try to help the other person, but by helping the other person feel comfortable, you yourself will also feel a little more comfortable by taking it off of you. It's not about me and my presentation, how I'm looking in this date. It's more like, I'm gonna take this person out for a date. I hope, it's hard, and I, at the very least, at the end of the evening, hope that they had an enjoyable time.
Well, that's a great piece of advice, Mr. Robinson. It reminds me of the general advice we've talked about, things like that. When you're starting to get really nervous and focused, often that is a very self-focus. You're kind of focused on yourself and how you might come across or your feelings, versus this idea of, well, no, actually, I'm here to serve somebody else. I hope they have a good time. It does take your mind's focus and point it away from you and really focus on that other person. Right. It actually helps too in conversation. Say you're in the car driving someplace, or you're at the coffee spot, or wherever it is you're going for your date. It's not that you have to think of everything to say. in fact, if anything, you're focused on the other person. You're interested in them. You want to find out about them. You have questions to ask. It's
Yep.
It helps to lift a little bit of burden from you, and does tend to ease some nervousness as well.
The one thing, in fact, this was advice from somebody else a long time ago. Whatever you think of personality types and personality traits, I think we can all agree there's introverts and there's extroverts. Even that's on a scale a little bit. But here's my tip for if you think you're with an introvert. If you ask them a question, give them time to answer. I will actually. Okay, so I actually did apply this when I started working more and more with the youth camps. I started going to teen camp every year. And one of the first things I would try to do is, if I was working with camp teens, was identify who were the introverts and the extroverts. And I always approached the introverts slightly differently than I did the extroverts.
Interesting.
And, because like the tendency, if you're an extrovert and you're talking to an introvert, you start thinking, hey, what's your favorite color? Hey, do you like cars? Hey, what's your favorite bird? And they're not answering as quick as you want, so you just go on to the next question. And
that's a very good point, Mr. Robinson.
You also have an introverted wife.
I do, and actually, I myself, my wife has characterized me, I think, accurately as an ambivert, based on, she's looked at stuff that.
You're just trying to trigger me.
I am probably trying to trigger you, because it's not an I or anyway. And I see, I've whether there's such a thing as an ambivert or not, I've seen that in my experience in terms of how I get energy. I do get sort of a quick, high energy levels from interacting with people, like an extrovert might. It's kind of energizing, but it's kind of like sugar type fast release energy. And I've found that it doesn't last. It's very, very tight. Versus the times on my own by myself is when I recharge. And you're right, you can put a lot of pressure on. And you're right, sometimes you do serve the introvert by not asking a bunch of questions, by having something to say.
Well, from my research, there's no such thing as an ambivert.
I knew you were going to have to say something.
But what I would say is actually far more of a compliment. You're a mature extrovert.
Oh, well, thanks.
You've learned not to blab all the time. Give everybody else a chance to say something.
Well, some might disagree with that, but I'll take it. I was finding it more validating in terms of what provides energy, right? What recharges one's batteries, but that may not really have anything to do with extroversion or introversion.
I'm afraid after this podcast is over, what's really going to come out of this will people debating introversion and extroversion.
Could be. I will say, when I took the Myers-Briggs test way back when I was in my early 20s, the score was not high in extroversion.
Yeah.
It wasn't that. It definitely was that in the direction. Okay, we'll real focus. Going back to focusing on other people. And I would add too, in terms of avoid this is aided by the not thinking exclusively kind of mindset. The Song of Solomon gives this interesting advice in 3 different verses, and it keeps saying the same thing. It keeps highlighting the Shulamite in that. Says, I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the does of the field, do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases. That is, there's a time for such things. And when you're young and you're first going out on dates, that's another problem with romantic thinking, is it actually does tend to be very self-oriented when it's immature, to be sure, when it's young. And it might think, oh, I'm going to do this for this person because it's going to be the most romantic thing they've ever experienced. When really, I can sense it's also kind of a seeking of self-glory in that sense, because they're going to think I'm the most romantic person, or it's going to endear them to me in a kind of a romantic way. And it's another benefit to avoiding that focus on exclusivity, is it tends to remove some of the burden of romantic expectations, or for that matter, actually, temptations. But focusing on the other person. There's a passage that might seem kind of strange, and I definitely want to include a caveat with it, because it can be taken too far. But when it comes to Scripture, you're not really. Can we take Scripture too far? Well, we can if we turn it into something it's not trying to say, and that is in 1 Timothy in chapter 5. In 1 Timothy in chapter 5, there's this great piece of advice that Paul gives to Timothy that really serves as a basis. It serves to illustrate how God teaches us to interact with everybody throughout the world, like everybody in the world. And it's him giving advice to Timothy about how he deals with certain ones. And it's in 1 Timothy 5, verses 1 through 2. We'll, of course, narrow on a particular part. In verse 1, beginning there, he says to Timothy, "Do not rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father." Now, what does that mean? Sometimes in the ministry, you do have to rebuke older men, but kind of like when my children have to rebuke me, because it has happened. I think we've mentioned this on the podcast before. They do so respectfully. Not, "Dad, go jump in a lake. You're a big jerk," or anything like that. But no, they do so respectfully. But they do speak the truth to me. So do not rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father. Younger men as brothers. Older women as mothers. Younger women as sisters, with all purity. Now, we could have made this a separate topic. I read an article just recently, Mr. Robinson, by some feminists, writing how we need to abolish the family. The family is a source of oppression, and it does nothing but to serve capitalistic, blah, 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 blah things. And they talk about depersonalizing it all and essentially giving over to the state. That the kind of functions that supposedly family has to serve, why can't we trust the state to do those things? It was one of the most programmed brains I've ever read, writing in a major publication. But the fact is, here's what the state would have to do. It'd have to teach you how to deal with everybody else in society, because the family naturally does that. And when it comes to dating, there's advice right here that really is very important, and that is to treat younger men as brothers and younger women as sisters. That is, our siblings should teach us how to deal with those of our age and such. So when you go out on a date, if you're a guy, you got to think of it as taking out a sister. It's not a sister. Clearly, you're not going to marry your sister. Just like the guy, if you're a girl, is not your brother. And yes, one day you will definitely marry someone that you have taken on a date, right? That's the plan. But still, in terms of a default setting, to try to keep it out of a focus on romance, rather focus on if I wanted to show this sister a really good time, a lot of fun, or something enlightening, or something we can enjoy together, or think of it as, if it's a guy, think of it as a brother. If you're a guy, I hope, and you have a sister, I hope you're thinking that you want to protect that sister. You want to open the door for your sister. You want to make sure that she is taken care of. I know when I was really young, I wanted my sister to walk off of a cliff. That would have been the thing that I would have enjoyed the most.
Was this really a high cliff?
That's right. But then as I matured and recognized, well, wait a minute, this is actually my sister. And then as we got older, even when we didn't always get along, we get along great now. But when we didn't get along when we were younger, even when because your sibling knows how to push your buttons, etc. Still, there's times when I would kind of circle the wagons and want to protect her and want her to be safe, want her to be taken care of, and didn't like it if if I was mistreating her, that might be kind of one thing. I didn't like it if I saw somebody else mistreating her. And then, of course, we learned to actually treat each other decently as people. But that said, God gives you a family to learn those things. And I know it's the opposite of what the world says. But yeah, think of this person you're taking out on a date, whether it's to go to the car races, whether it's, to go have a picnic. Think of it as a sibling and keep it in that environment. And then it's not as strange also when you happen to take somebody else on a date or somebody else on a date. Now, you will eventually discover things that, again, like I said, you will marry someone not in a sibling kind of mode. But that said, it's important in terms of just regular dating that you think of it that way.
So since that's going to be kind of a tough sell for people to have that mentality for a variety of reasons, what I'm hearing you say is essentially treat who you're going out with a level of respect as you would your own a family member.
That's a great way. Thank you, Mr. Robinson, for interpreting that really well. If you think about it, it's this advice applies, say, in the congregation, which is actually the most direct context of 1 Timothy chapter 5. As Sabbath services, when you deal with your female peers if you're a guy, or when you deal with your male peers as a young woman, well, hopefully you treat them like you would a sibling, like you show some respect. You consider them an individual just like you who deserves to be spoken well to,
yes,
who deserves to be treated well, or by you. And going back to what it says in Philippians, actually, if anything, treat them better than yourself.
Right.
Try to But dating doesn't change that. Just because instead of moving from being in services, after services, now you've moved to a coffee shop. Or now you've moved to a picnic or a walk someplace in the neighborhood. Well, that doesn't change all of a sudden. No, you still treat this person with the kind of respect that you'd want your sister to be treated with, or the
Yeah.
kind of respect you want your people to treat your brother with. It's just now that it's just the two of you talking. Now it's just the two of you interacting. And so, yeah, actually bringing in respect, that's actually a great way to focus it, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you.
And it's not respecting someone to see them as simply an opportunity
Right.
for you
Yeah.
to
Well, we haven't even talked about potentially predatory male behavior in terms of trying to find girls.
Yeah, and we definitely the word predatory shouldn't be involved in any kind of way if you're going on a date. And actually, that's a good opportunity to bring this up, and that is your parents really should be a part of your dating. It's a dating life, quote unquote. I don't like to call it that necessarily, but the activity of dating is not something that you would do apart from your parents. No, they should be the people you're talking with about the date is coming up, and they should be among the first people you want to talk to about the date afterwards, and then taking their feedback and such, and really involving your parents in such things.
Well, when my married daughter was courting, we looked up courting earlier. Yeah, courting early does mean dating with the intent to marriage.
Yeah, a lot more
Marrying,
serious intent, right?
They went about it the right way, and they were careful about it. And most of the time, they would come over to our house for dinner at least once a week, and that was a great way of doing it. And also had the side benefit of, she was dating a guy who kind of, I don't really want to hang out with your parents. So then that was actually also going to be
That is a
problem as well.
bad
Yeah.
sign. That's right. Whenever the individual is not interested in hanging around with your parents, you should immediately wonder why and discuss it with your parents. That is
And if
something you should keep in mind.
If he's always trying to just do stuff with only you and be alone, another red flag in my opinion.
Red flag. Oh, we could probably do a whole podcast just on such red flags. Let me write that one. That one down. Okay. So, but eventually, we do want to highlight, as you become a young adult, you are going to start thinking more narrowly. You are going to start dating with more intention of, okay, now I want to find whom I would like to marry, and dating could be a part of that process. It's important when you're younger to think of it more about learning, etc. But even then, I would say, even as you become a young adult and you are more in the vein of, well, yeah, I could actually get married, sometime soon. I'd actually like to start thinking about this a little more seriously. I think all these principles are still important to keep in mind. Make that date about giving them a good time, not focusing on yourself. Also, don't make it a big focus on romance. Don't do that yet. You're still evaluating things. And when you're a young adult, it's that much easier to behave that way then, when you've been dating right up until that point, and when you're actually doing things properly.
Right. I mean, it's one of the most important decisions you could possibly make in your life. And it's tough to be level-headed and logical about it when emotions really are coming into play. I mean, God gives us that, built into us, that ability to feel that love, especially that early love that's so exciting. Of course, when you get older and washed up like us, I mean, you don't feel it. I'll say this: the love exists, and it's different, and it's arguably deeper.
Oh yeah.
After you've been married for a long time, so well, I'm getting ahead of myself. But
no, I think that's a good. No, I think that's still relevant, because we can get caught up in the rush of feelings and emotions and stuff when we're younger, and we experience that with our spouses. When we first, we're first kind of getting serious way back for us. But that said, I think you'll agree with this, Mr. Robinson, just based on what you said. What we have now is not that. It's not that kind of heady chemical kind of rush. And yet I would not trade what I have now with my wife and that level of relationship for that other earlier one 30 plus years ago. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
yes,
I would not trade that for anything.
100%. The Commissioner of Common Sense immediately approves that.
Man,
that
I love it when he shows himself and he likes something that we say.
I guess when you're dating, you're working up to a very, very serious decision that you're going to make that will alter the course of your life forever. And especially once children enter the scene, and there's a reason God hates divorce and emphasizes how important it is to stay together and work things out. So don't be in a rush. Don't ignore red flags when you're dating
Right.
somebody. All too easy
Right.
to do. I can't remember if I've told this story on the podcast or not, but I have told other kids this, and I told my daughter this. I used to listen to a show in the mid-'90s, the Dr. Laura Schlesinger show. I think I've mentioned it before.
Yeah, Mr. Weston mentions her a lot too.
And I listened to that show for several years, all 3 hours every day, and I
Wow.
really thought I could guest host the show. If she was out of town, was in just in an emergency, I don't really know you, but do you know? And
Mr.
so I guest
Robinson,
host.
come
Yeah,
fill in.
Yeah, come fill in. Because once you listen to the show that often, the calls become really repetitive, and they start to be the same thing. And a very common repetitive one was, "Hey, Dr. Laura, I'm married so many years, and I have some kids." And often they didn't have kids yet. It was really the early marriage. And it was more often the women than the men, but both could do it. "Hey, we just got married, and my husband's manifesting this behavior that's super frustrating to me. What should I do about it?" And her question was always, "Did he do it while you were dating?" And the answer 99% of the time was yes.
Mm,
And she said, "Then why did you expect it to change?"
yeah.
And that's so true. We tend to think the opposite. We think, "Oh, well, this is kind of annoying here, but once we get married, then they'll be better. We'll be better. We're more mature now." And no, that behavior does not change. It only gets worse.
Right.
Depending on what it is. I don't want to be too dogmatic about it, but the point is, don't ignore, or at least make a calculation. Okay, this is frustrating. Let's assume this is going to stay this way for the next 20 years. You got to take that into account.
You do, and that is one of the benefits of keeping your parents in the loop, because if you're talking about those dates and there's things you're concerned about, they have years on you, and they're able to say, "Oh, wow, that's good," or whatever the case is. They can bring perspective to the things you experience on these dates that you wouldn't have otherwise. And if you remember that a date is about the other person, that also means getting to know that person. I remember Mr.
Right. Let's remember what the purpose of dating is.
Exactly right. It used to be, I've heard Mr. Weston emphasize some time ago that's why, for instance, going to a movie can be not a great date because you're just sitting there watching a movie for a couple of hours. Well, and also you can be surprised by what movie you decided to go to and really regret it. I would say if you are going to go to a movie connected to a date, you need to investigate the details of that movie so you're not surprised by anything. But the one way that could be turned into something positive is if it's watched to give you something to talk about later. So maybe you go to the movie, then you go to the IHOP or go to something else afterwards, but then you have dialogue. But why are you doing that? Well, if you're investing in the other person, and if you're doing it wisely, you're trying to get to know the other person. And if you've discovered something in getting to know them, well, I don't think that's something that's necessarily going to change. You literally got to know it about them. That's why you were out, is to actually spend some time getting to know someone a little bit better. Well, the fact is, between now, wherever you are, unless you're already married,
Then it's too late.
yeah, between this moment right now when you're listening to this and your future marriage, there's going to be some dating, right? Between that, there's at least one, right? There's a date, probably more, between now and when you are married. And it is a shame that the world has just ruined what dating is.
Yes.
Because it's something simple. I go back to the article. We're going to link to it, at livingyouth.org. But it's just an appointment you have with one or more, if it's a group, but with someone of the opposite sex, to have a nice time, some sort of activity you're going to do together. It should be kept simple. The world has ruined it, and that is a shame because the interaction between the sexes is kind of part of what makes the whole world go round, right? It's kind of part of what brings joy to life, and it can be done right. And thankfully, many in the church do it right, and you can too.
Yes.
Smith and Robinson.